You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. Last week we talked about the Facebook contractors who review and delete bannable content from your feed, and about the PTSD those contractors suffer on the regular. We also discussed screen engagement, aka what social media companies do to keep you glued to the screen. If you haven't heard it yet, we very much encourage you to go back and check out that episode. On today's episode, we'll talk about what that screen engagement is costing you emotionally. How much damage does it do to the psyche being connected to social media 145 minutes a day? 145 minutes, by the way, is the average we spend checking our feed, according to Statista. And we'll talk about the personal cost of engagement by busting a few myths. Myths like myth 1. All right, so social media kills a few hours per day. Big deal. It's not like Facebook is killing people, right? Myth 2. Okay, so maybe a few foreign nations are using social media to organize killings, but that's in other countries. It's not like social media is spiking death and depression rates here in the U.S., is it? Myth 3. Death aside, what are the potential health risks of social media? And what can we do to disengage and put the screen down?
So last week we hypothetically got a job at a place called Cognizant, and Todd and I were dream employed by a Facebook contractor, and we were expecting $140,000 a year jobs, company cars. We were expecting lush offices in like open spaces. Like we wanted to look like we were in a architecture magazine for an office. Where we ended up was somewhere that didn't quite have the perks we expected. We're not getting $140K a year. So how does it look for us at Cognizant, Todd?
Well, these contractor jobs are garbage. And this chunk we're going to be talking about, one of those, which is in Tampa. And it is a stark contrast to the perks that are lavished on Facebook on their main campus, where they're playing foosball and drinking beer on Fridays to keep the shots.
The standard office chair is a beanbag.
Yeah, the Silicon Valley stuff. This place is absolutely hell on earth. Now, the average Facebook employee pay all in with benefits, stock options is $240K a year.
Oh, I undersold it by 100. Holy hell. Okay.
That seemed high to me too. They're blending in all those big CEOs' stock options and stuff. The contract moderators, the people that dig through the gutters of Facebook and stop for kids and people seeing murders and rapes and all kinds of horrible things, they make $28,000 a year. And it drives them to the point, Joe, nearly to suicide.
Wow.
But if you're supervised there, you probably make a lot more, right, Joe? You probably make $100,000, having to deal with all these people who are having breakdowns all the time.
I would hope so. Hurting people, like hurting people who are going slowly mad. I imagine that would pay a lot.
Well, they have on these sales floors, or I guess on these moderator floors, they have counselors there that are their job is pretty much to put people back together. So if you're crying, you have a mental breakdown, they take you aside, they comfort you and say, listen, Joe, you're just having a panic attack. You're just imagining all this. It's just in your head. The stress is just getting to you. But what their real thing, they don't really care about Joe's mental health. All they care about is getting Joe back to the computer, back to work. It's like one of those sports doctors. They don't want to fix the athlete. They just want to get them back in the game.
This doesn't... Okay, so sports doctor, that's accurate. What it reminds me of are the guys that are like the temporary mechanics in a factory. So like if these people are pushing the product, if Facebook is the product and these poor people are having to moderate horrible like stabbings and brutal things and nudity, like they're trying to moderate all the bad things that we don't get to see on Facebook. They are basically like human sorters. And then there's these, these psychologists they're going around and just repairing them enough to get them back to doing that job. That is wild.
It's kind of like they're thinking that they're not human. They're saying you see these horrible, disgusting, traumatic things all day. Just turn the volume off. Just push the pause button, and it won't bother you. It won't affect you.
Todd's not being facetious there. That is actually something that these moderators are told, is if they can't handle the violence or the crazy things they're moderating, they're told to turn the volume off or to mute it or to take breaks, basically.
Now, talking about the supervisors who would have to manage, let's say, anywhere from 5 to 10 of these people who are on the brink of collapse and quitting and behind on work, they make a whopping more, $1 an hour.
Wow. That sounds exactly like the kind of thing that...
Sounds like America, right?
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. I was going to say it sounds like Amazon, but it just sounds like America.
Yeah. Assistant manager at McDonald's. You get a responsibility raise, but no pay increase.
Right.
Now, as far as stress goes, you got to keep in mind, and I can't wrap my head around these kind of numbers. Facebook has 2.3 billion users.
I do remember seeing somebody post on Twitter that if Facebook were a country, it would be substantially larger than China.
That's a populated country.
Right. Yeah, China is 1.39, so about 1.4 billion, and India is 1.36. So
you put them together.
Yeah, substantially.
China and India, the
right.
most populated countries in the world. Now, as many users as is, Joe, think of how many posts there are.
Yeah, that's a lot of people throwing, not garbage. I was going to say that many people throwing garbage online, but honestly, if only 1 in 10 people ever post something that is wild or offensive, that's still a lot.
I know. Tell me what you really feel, Joe. You feel all posts on social media are garbage.
Okay, well, I feel like a lot of them are a waste of time, but that's just me. I only the funny cat stuff is relevant. Everything else is a waste.
These billions of users, billions of posts, there's so much misery to go around. Now, the problem with these contractor jobs is they're held to an impossible standard. They're supposed to be 95% correct and get everything but 5% of mistakes can get through.
So I actually listened to a side podcast that talked about that accuracy. We'll link that off in our episode 2. Did you happen to catch what that accuracy meant, like what they were aiming for?
Well, I said they're shooting for 98%.
Right.
What acceptable was 95%, which is like playing a terrible, violent, most disgusting video game all day, every hour, and barely making any mistakes.
Right. Not only are they playing a terribly violent video game, never making mistakes, that accuracy isn't based on objective measures. So it's not like they look at a violent video and then them saying, no, this is bad, and banning it. It's not that simple. It's they look at something that, like, a celebrity has said something vile, and they have to decide, is it bannable or do we keep it? And there isn't a hard, fast rule for that day by day. What they have is everybody at Facebook, like the actual Facebook, not contractors, they will decide that, the things Miley Cyrus says today, they're not bannable because she is, exceptional circumstances because she's a celebrity. So these people, their rule book changes depending on what the social atmosphere is at Facebook. So that 98% accuracy that they're trying to get, or above 95, that sways with the tides. If there's a shooting that day, I remember listening in the podcast, then they have to ignore some of their rules because people are just going to be talking about something natural. Or naturally, they're going to be talking about the news of something violent.
High on that topic.
Right.
So in our already stressful job, which you explained to me, it sounds almost impossible to be able to keep up that pace.
Yeah, the people there, they're under ridiculous pressure, and it's for things that are flexible. And that's the worst combination of things that you'd want from a job.
Now, one of the worst things for these moderators is they become very, very paranoid because they've been surrounded by this violence in their mind. Their brain has just been soaked in this toxic environment. So they start fearing for their safety. They start bringing guns, concealed weapons to work. Fired employees who are angry at what they've been through, their PTSD, are threatened to come back to work and harm their old colleagues. And you start to believe they're going to come back because you've been watching this violence over and over.
Right. If I watched enough videos of coworkers coming back with a gun, I would totally expect that too.
And I can imagine the conversation in the break room aren't, what'd you do this weekend? They're probably just talking about nasty, horrible things they saw at work. What do we do at work? We talk about work. We complain about work, right? Randy was a long-time employee there, and he started bringing a concealed weapon to work, and he was afraid for his safety. Now, a former coworker said that she was very aware that he had a gun at work, and she was all about it. She was all for it. She wasn't afraid of Randy to have it. They have security guards that guard this place from people who are not happy that they got banned, and mostly from ex-employees. So they didn't think that their weapons in their eyes would be enough if they were attacked.
Wow.
But they had to bring their own weapons to work to protect themselves.
In case someone pulled a matrix to get past the security guards, we have Randy with a pistol.
It's probably all in their head. And they're in a lot of, probably even more danger having Randy with a gun at work under these extreme stressful situations.
Right.
Now, the craziest story I heard in all this research is there's a woman there named Sarah. And they looked up from their computers because they saw a man standing out smoking on another building. They had been watching for so long hundreds and hundreds of suicides. The moderators got up and thinking, here's a suicide. They ran over there. The man didn't jump, though. And then everyone realized it was a fellow employee. All he was doing was taking a break.
Holy shit. So they had been so trained by this violence that they expected just to see it in their real lives.
Conditions. So think about these people that go home and try to have regular lives with their girlfriends, boyfriends, spouses, and even their own kids.
Wow. So as the social media wing of the Re-Engineered You, Todd has, he interfaces with the public and with our Instagram and with Facebook a lot more than I do.
A thankless, underpaying job.
Certainly.
I was fighting with a troll today.
Oh, jeez. What would you say most people's Facebook profiles look like?
These perfect lives of perfect kids getting good grades, going to recitals, playing baseball.
Like a yogurt commercial or an ad for antidepressants, right? So there are books and sort of an entire new arm of psychology that covers like our digital selves, our profiles, and what that's actually doing to us. We kind of want to discuss that a little bit, not necessarily what that reveals about us, the narcissism of us staring into the big the pond that is social media, and what staring into a screen does for us as far as narcissism. We want to focus on like tangibles. Todd and I want to look at what are things that we've seen on social media that are pretty much directly tied, and not like the hidden costs, but things that are pretty easy to see.
Well, I always thought of it, Joe, and until we started doing this research, that it was more just a time burglar. It wasn't about what you were seeing or what it was doing to you mentally. It was more like you weren't going out living real life.
Right. Yeah, I think that's how... I hate to say it, this isn't a dig at your age, but I think that's how the older view of social media used to be. That it was the fake life you lived before you went out and lived your real life outside. But more and more, it's kind of an interface. It's more like a heads-up display of life. You use Facebook to figure out where you're going for the evening once you look at, what your friends are up to. Or you look at Facebook to see who you're going to be chasing down in the streets with machete, if you want to be the grimmest bastard on earth, which I am. So I'm it's not even a joke. I am referring to the study we're going to cover. So do you want to get into that a little bit?
Please.
Okay. So a lot of our listeners probably heard, at least tangentially, about the Facebook genocides. And again, we're not strictly targeting Facebook with this. We are using Facebook as an example, but social media is going to run the risk of all of these things no matter who's running the platform. The one thing I do agree with Zuckerberg about is that if his platform wasn't in the slot, somebody else's is, or already is, if you look at the wild stuff that happens on other platforms. So we're picking this up from the New York Times.
But on that point, I was talking to a Nike executive the other day, and that's what they said, because you're getting this bad press about Nike and their labor things.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Todd, all the other companies do it too. It's because we're number one that we're the one on the New York Times.
Right. They're the front of the line. And that doesn't mean that they have good policy. It doesn't mean that they're being responsible. It just means they're the ones doing it at that moment. So we're not letting Facebook off the hook. We're just saying that they happen to be number one at the moment. Back in 2018, because they are number one, Myanmar, we're going to talk about the Myanmar genocide. You want to talk solid proof that this platform can be used for anxiety and basically evil? This is a good example. Now, because I am a ignorant American, I knew of this. Like, I heard that another country had used Facebook for something terrible, like a genocide. I literally typed in Facebook genocide to find this online. So in 2018, it was building for a year, so it wasn't actually 2018, but that's when New York Times reported on it. Myanmar military personnel started posting on Facebook as fans of pop stars and like national heroes. So they fanboys. The military, like guys in camo, were online posting as like fanboys or fanboys and fangirls. And they were posting in this way because they wanted to, A, not look like the freaking military, and two, because they wanted to talk about Islam, saying that Islam was a threat to Buddhism. And the reason why, if you're unaware, Buddhism is the major religion in Myanmar. The Rohingyans, who are Muslim, they are the minority. So whenever I think about these genocides, I don't know why my mind went to this. I always assumed that when people like organize stuff like this using Facebook, they were using Facebook because they're the smaller group. That they need to use social media because they don't have the might of the military.
Yeah, they don't have enough tanks and muscle, so they have to get some momentum another way and radicalize people in different angles.
Right, exactly. But it was the Myanmar military themselves. Like, why couldn't they roll out in tanks and do this? But no, they used Facebook to drum up both approval and to sort of get the backing of citizens and to stoke hate, like to get that fervor going. And that's exactly what they did, is they got people to rally against the Muslim Rohingyans. And they used Facebook's hugely influential reach in Myanmar. I'm going to quote the article here. It says, quote, Facebook's wide reach in Myanmar, where it was so broadly used, most of the country's 18 million internet users confuse the Silicon social media platform with the internet. So they use Facebook so much, they don't think of it as this is Zuckerberg's company. They think of it as this is the internet.
And it's so much information overload, they just can't process all of it. Right.
So it's hard to sort of think of these people as gullible when they're like, yeah, this is the internet. This is like me looking up Snopes or Wiki. So yeah, human rights organizations blame the anti-Rohingyan propaganda for basically inciting, murders and rapes. And they were able to tie it back. They actually they've supplied evidence. It was not difficult for them to go back and look at the propaganda campaign that had been going on for half a decade. And it was all fake names and sham accounts. The BBC's final tally, what they could figure out, BBC reported that thousands died and more than 700,000 Rohingyans were forced to flee to neighboring countries, mostly Bangladesh.
700,000 because of social media?
Yes, because of a Facebook troll campaign by the Myanmar military. It got thousands of people killed, and more than 700,000 people had to run away from their homes.
So that's as real gets.
Yeah, that's lands are burning behind you, and that is what you like what we just referred to as a non-real platform, where we're just like, it's a time burglar, it's a subset of real life, and this is what it can do. It's
creating fear.
Right. Do you want to hit a little bit closer to home? Because when I read that and it's interesting, but I think that's another country. Like, that couldn't happen here, right?
We're safe here in America.
Right.
We're above that.
So we're not going to get really too far into this because it is going to be kind of depressing. And we want to talk about some of the statistics are a bit iffy, and we will confront that. But we're going to talk about teen depression rates and suicides. And again, we're only going to cover this in so much as we're recognizing it and talking about stats. We're not going to really dive into it because we want to cover this as a subject for screen anxiety. So we're just recognizing it. The second largest cause of death in children and teens right now, that's ages 10 to 24, is suicide. It's second only to accidents. So the two ways somebody in that age bracket dies is, number one, they fall off a ladder or get hit by a car or a car wreck or something, an accident, or they take their own life. The rising demographics, they have coincided with the rates of social media use. So we're not going to say that social media is doing it. If we were on an evening news program, we might do that. We might, pound our fist on the table and say that, Facebook is killing teens. But they have found studies where, kids have more health problems once they pass the 2-hour mark. We're going to have links to those studies in case you're interested. This one is from Helio. But they talked about how teens who reported using social media for more than 2 hours a day, so that pocket of screen anxiety we're talking about, they reported poor mental health, and their distress and rates of suicidal ideation, that's psychology speak for thinking about suicide, go up. It jumps from above the norm, which any amount, if you're a parent, is bad.
Well, it is. I've always thought about this because, obviously, as you brought up earlier in the show, of my elderliness, I would think if you were a teenager, which all go through breakups, and it was all put all over social media, how much more stress that'd put on you. And also bullying. It doesn't just happen on the bus or at school, but it happens even worse online.
Right. And that's something we don't think about with bullying is when we say the word cyberbullying or online bullying, most people are thinking one a-hole you went to school with, like somebody from high school who is evil and is getting online and telling you that you're dumb or you deserve to die. And that is, I would never be a cyberbully. But think of it this way. You have a good friend. She's amazing. She's funny. She's witty. She tells you about, the coolest stuff on Netflix to watch. She breaks up with a guy who she tells you is a dirtbag. And then you and the rest of her friends go online and tell that guy, you're a dirtbag. She deserves better. You just defended your friend.
It's getting piled on too. And
right.
You wouldn't say those things to his face in person.
Yeah, you just participated in a heinous amount of cyberbullying, and that person is now at risk. That person that you dogpiled on because it felt gratifying, because you were defending a friend. So cyberbullying isn't the kid from A Christmas Carol being a jerk for no reason. Cyberbullying is we pick sides, we think we're right, and then we pile on somebody, and then that person becomes at risk.
It's very safe for us to hide behind the screen, but it's very personal to them and very embarrassing, humiliating to them.
Right, exactly. I've done that, by the way. Like I think everybody I know has had that, where they have stepped up to defend a friend, and they didn't realize they were effectively bullying somebody.
Well, anytime I run in our social media thing, I have to pick a side. I can't just be indifferent for some reason on social media. I have to agree with them and love it and share it, or I have to say, no, that's wrong and you're an idiot. There's no in between.
I have academically defended articles and things that I've written and engaged in cyber arguments, and that definitely could be misconstrued as bullying. At some point, if I'm telling somebody that they are, uneducated on a subject, I'm becoming personal. So that counts too.
If I was having a spirited debate with somebody in person, for social tax, I wouldn't shoot down what they said. I wouldn't be that strong opinionated.
Right. I would be diplomatic and say, I feel this thing could have been better thought out. You scrub. No, I'm kidding.
You're thinking out loud.
I am. Now, there is a counter argument to the idea that social media is causing all this depression and suicide amongst teens. The counter argument is that that could just be accounted for by poor sleep. That if you are looking at the screen late into the night every single night, your sleep is going to be poor, and you can account for all of that stuff just with poor sleep. So we're only pointing that out. I don't actually think that's true. I'm just pointing it out because that is the legit counter argument in the scientific community right now.
Combination, though.
Yeah, it's not mutually exclusive. It can totally be both. So here are the numbers, and this is according to Time, so these are pretty solid. Between 2009 and 2017, rates of depression among kids 14 to 17 increased by more than 60%, and more than 1 in 8 Americans 12 to 25 experienced major depressive episodes. Now, there are a couple of people who argue that isn't social media. This comes from Lawrence Steinberg, who is a professor of psychology at Temple University. And he says, quote, I think every generation of adults tries to pin a negative trend they see in young people on whatever the current technology is. And he says that he believes it's a cumulative impact of a lot of things that are causing suicide rates to increase. So that's one argument that says this isn't Facebook, this isn't social media. Just we always blame technology, and that is a legit argument too. Can I pitch you my own pet personal argument, like why I think depression and suicides are going up?
You go, then I'll go.
Okay. My theory is that it's a combination of social media and wealth inequality. that not only are people spending more time online being bullied or being, if nothing else, pressured, seeing what other people's lives look like, they are also living through one of the biggest wealth inequalities in decades, in possibly centuries. And on top of that, it's all visible. We've never lived through an age where we have had, like, during the Great Depression, they knew rich bankers had their money. They weren't able to log into a website and see that rich banker during the Great Depression spending their money.
Having their 16-year-old's birthday party cost $350,000.
Right. Todd and I covered an episode where we talked about the rich kids of Instagram. We were talking about, that was our entitlement episode where it was kids with cheetahs on their Lamborghinis. We couldn't see that before when we had these big wealth inequalities. So now, if you're a kid and you aren't able to buy Converse, like tennis shoes, to impress your friends, and then you see, your friends, throwing a pool party, that's got to be crushing.
I totally agree with you this. And I was in, middle class, but a lot of the kids where I went to school were upper class, and they wouldn't wear more expensive clothes than anybody else. A little bit nicer, but nothing like nowadays.
Right.
Where it's all about shopping, all about how much you spend on something. It's definitely gotten worse.
Right. I think that when we talk about personal narrative, that we have to justify our own good fortune, I think part of that is done online.
Another one that's brand new is it's very common for kids on their way to school to have a photo shoot every day and have to hear how gorgeous they look at least 3 times a day.
That is true.
This reinforcement of that was never around when I was around. That can only cause, and I know from all the younger people I know in their early 20s all have had multiple panic attacks and they're high strung, they have high anxiety. So something's definitely changed.
Right. You're obligated to click like because it's your friend and they look hot today. And if you don't press like, they won't do it for your picture later too.
So one way to get your mind right and start putting positive things in your brain is to surround yourself with and read and listen to good things. Right, Joe?
Totally. I have a list of things, podcasts and audiobooks that help me specifically de-stress.
And for this show, we always try to get an answer, a cure, or something you can do to be a better you.
Right.
Well, when I started doing this podcast, I reached out and got a mentor. And her name is Robin Conley Downs. And I was in a yoga class with her. And I knew she had a very, very successful podcast. And now she's got a book that's selling like crazy, just selling off the shelves. And the name of the show is The Feel Good Effect. And she has a PhD, and she interviews all kinds of different subjects. So she has a guest platform, unlike ours.
Right.
So you listen to her show, and you'll have a takeaway. It's not just listening to her, or it's not a podcast about guys just talking about drinking beer. But if you listen to that every day, you're going to have a good takeaway, and you're going to feel better.
I usually listen to fantasy and fiction on Audible, but I did listen to a couple of episodes of hers, and there were legit tactics in there. Like, I expected it to be very sort of holistic, airy-fairy, new agey nonsense, yeah. And there were a couple pieces of advice she gave that were actually like actionable, feeling better kind of things that would, make you more upbeat, especially after going on social media.
She has a nice, calming, pleasant voice, and she's the real deal. I've been to her seminars and stuff. She's smart, but doesn't act like she is.
Right. So we also want to kind of thank her for some of the inception of this episode, certainly.
Well, how I got in the podcast business, I knew she was successful, so I was falling around like a puppy dog. So I cornered her one time. We had this big yoga party. There's all kinds of stuff, drinking and dancing, all stuff. And I pretty much just talked her ear off and took all notes down. But I'm proud to say that every single thing she told me, we've done on this show.
That's awesome.
So thank you, Robin Downs.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. We are on episode 62 now. So, whatever you told Todd, can I project. I assume she was in a corner, shaking, and her drink was spilling all over her while you cornered her and grilled her for information. But whatever she told you, it worked.
Well, and I have to thank her handsome husband, Andrew Downs. He was the one, because I kept saying it wasn't good enough. One of the guys says, just get started. It'll get better.
Right.
Which was simple but great advice.
That is great advice.
I've probably listened to the Feel Good Effect about 30 different episodes. And my favorite one, it's on her website, it's in the show notes, is she had a guest on, and the topic was breaking up with your cell phone.
Okay, very timely. We're going to be talking in our next science section about exactly that, so everybody should go check that out too. So, originally this was going to be where the episode sort of ended. When I first read the articles about Cognizant, it was all mind-blowing, but at that point, the worst that had happened is a slow mental degradation of a building full of people who slowly started believing in flat earth theories. But it actually got a little bit darker. There was an update on this article in 2019 that I hadn't seen. Do you want to talk about that update a little bit, Todd?
Well, I want to talk about who it's about. And the man's name is Utley, Keith Utley. And he was a Coast Guard vet, 42 years old, had a lovely wife, and he had 2 young daughters. His reason for working in this business and working at one of these moderator jobs was he saw it as a cause to take child molesters off the internet. And he wanted to stomp out racism as well. He just wanted to help people.
That is something we didn't really cover in the last, in part 1, but there is a nobility to this. The idea that these people would be willing to take sponges and go scrub the internet where most people go spend their time. That is actually a pretty noble cause. These people deserve more than $14 an hour.
Yeah, it's saving lives just like a 911 operator. It really is. So Keith Utley, he's working at Facebook as a moderator, and he just died, slumped over of a heart attack at 42 years old with a wife and 2 young daughters. And in this stressful panic attack, near heart attack job position, they didn't even have an AED machine in the whole building.
Okay. So for anyone listening, the AED is it's a little electric shock kit that is supposed to be present in somewhere in your work building, hopefully.
But they have counselors that get you stop crying, stop shaking, and get back to work.
Right. They have counselors to come over and hit the machine to get it to keep running, but they won't keep an AED box.
They should at least have a nurse or a doctor or somebody on staff, an EMT person to keep these people alive.
I know this is so bleak and we're talking about stuff that's dark. I want to imagine one of those like counselors going over, finding him and turning around and being like, is there a real doctor in the building?
Well, rest in peace, Keith Utley.
So if that isn't a good way or a good reason for us to kind of walk away from the screen to, I mean, this whole episode series is about screen anxiety. So let's try to leave the anxiety. Do you want to talk about the science of quitting?
Please. I have some things I need to quit.
Okay. We're going to be looking into a Forbes article and a Business Insider article and a study by the University of Kentucky. So we've got all these linked to our show notes. Please check them out if you're thinking about trying to quit Facebook or social media in general. This is just really how to put down the scary black screen in your pocket. First off, will you feel happier walking away? There is officially, according to University of Kentucky, no significant change in a person's mood after they quit social media for 7, 14, 21, or 28 days, especially if they go back. So, like, there is the temporary boost of mood when you're able to tell people that you've quit. So have you had friends where you go out to lunch?
You go on a diet?
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. Like you go out with a friend and they're like, guess who quit social media? I'm not checking my phone anymore and I'm enlightened somehow.
Little salad dressing on my salad.
Right.
On my all new me. I think the biggest fear, and this is just a personal fear, I don't have any stats, I've done research on it, Joe, is the feeling of disconnecting, of losing all these friends that aren't even friends, losing track with all them.
That is precisely what they point to. So Business Insider has a segment that just says simply, you might be happier, but you'll feel out of the loop. And their studies have shown that overuse of Facebook leads to depressive symptoms, but keeping away from the platform itself can lead to, overall, it can be positive and make you feel positive, but it can make you feel cut off. So there's something called, and this comes from Stanford University, the welfare effect of social media. And they talked about how people who quit Facebook for a month, so we're past that initial brag about it to your friends point. If you're on it for a month or more, people start spending less on time overall. So if you quit, this is just about, this study was Facebook, but this applies to Instagram, and this applies to TikTok and things like that.
You're saying that break does you well.
Yeah, exactly.
It has a carryover effect.
Yeah, it starts teaching you to teach yourself to entertain yourself. So rather than logging into forums or chat rooms or getting on a Twitter war, which is, like the methadone of getting off Facebook, those would be like, I got off my major platform, now I need to get a minor platform going. Instead, these people sought out real world interactions, or they watch TV. Like they go back to the boob tube. It also found that these same people who quit and stayed off it for more than 30 days, they spent at least an hour a day doing free time or doing free activities. So the American Psychology Association has taken that and estimated that trying to multitask with social media in the background, specifically something like Facebook, it's not just the time you spend on Facebook. It's the multitasking between other things and Facebook or other things and another social media that saps your productivity by as much as 40% a day.
Yeah, you're getting constantly interrupted. It's like when you're working on something at work and you're really in it and someone comes and asks you a question, and 5 minutes later someone else does.
Right, exactly.
You're restarting every 5 minutes.
Yes. I'm going to quote their study here. That is precisely the way I think of it. The dings and the sounds from it that are designed to activate dopamine, those are distractions. From the study, they said, quote, deactivation caused small but significant improvements in well-being, and in particular on self-reported happiness, life satisfaction, depression, and anxiety. So we started this half of this episode by talking about how other psychologists are arguing that maybe it's, the two aren't tied, but it sure seems like when people quit Facebook, they report less depression and anxiety. So that is a pretty big correlation.
Do you think at Facebook they have this staff that nobody knows about of the world's best psychologist?
Oh, I absolutely believe that. After our episode on Google and how much brain power and how many professionals, how many psychologists, how many number crunchers, like they have people from multidisciplinary fields working on their data and algorithms, just their ability to hook people mentally. I have zero doubt they have the same kind of staffing on Facebook.
So they go to the best one that works in New York City or LA or London, whatever, and say, and they say, well, I make $500 an hour. I make, $600,000 a year. Come work at Facebook. We'll pay you 2.2.
Exactly. Yeah. How much, dopamine experts specifically, people who have programmed phone apps and, addiction specialists I mean, they literally go to people who know how to program things to activate dopamine in your brain. Those are the people who design the little thumbs up widgets and sound effects that go into social media. So
they understand how casinos work, how alcoholism works, how drug addiction works, and they use it.
Exactly.
They plug it into this.
They apply everything they can, kind of like Kraft Food used to dopamine engineer their food. Facebook has dopamine engineered their system. So is Twitter. So is every other social media system out there.
Whether it's online or gathered around the fire in a cave, humans are pretty predictable. We pay the most attention when we're being told about danger, and we believe pretty people. Radicalize us or try to charm us, and you'll have our engagement. And even if we know the message is bullshit, we can still be turned slowly by repeat, rational-sounding arguments. Telling big lies on social media is easy, to the point where it can win you an election. In debate and politics, lying fast enough, believably, so that by the time you've been debunked, you've already won people's opinion. That's called a gish gallop. And lies that sound novel, lies that feel like shocking glimpses into a hidden truth, spread faster than truths on Twitter. The lesson here, talented liars win. And it's up to us not to just filter out the lies, but to filter out our social media consumption. The falsehoods we absorb on social media take a toll. And we're not even seeing the worst of it. That's someone else's job. What we get exposed to are political bubbles, economic divisions, and profiles from friends that make their lives look ideal. The jury's still out, but our best minds are studying the effects of social media, and their early research isn't looking good for us. So if you ever feel like disconnecting, do it. Quit for a 10-minute break or 10 years. However long of a break you feel you need. But keep yourself informed and socially connected in other ways if you can. Self-regulated engagement is how to walk away. That's our methadone to Facebook's heroin. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
Connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, and articles for each of our episodes. We appreciate feedback and we love spirited debates, and we promise we will try not to cyberbully you while we debate you.
I'm still mad. I was cyberbullying Hannah1234 today, who was trolling me.
I am so sorry, Hannah.
I blocked you.
Oh, God.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.